She came stumbling out of the woods at dusk, barefoot and bloodied, like something out of a dream too vivid to be real. My son Eli saw her first. We were just finishing up our evening walk near the riverbank when he tugged on my sleeve and pointed. "Dad, is that a ghost?" At first I thought it was a trick of the light, the way the sun cut through the trees in broken shards. But then she stepped out onto the dirt path, arms shaking, dress torn at the shoulder, eyes wide and unfocused. Not a ghost, a survivor. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from and what kind of stories grab you? One's about survival, second chances, quiet heroes. I'll tell you this much. What happened next changed my life forever, and not in the way you'd expect. My name's Mark Dawson. I'm a 37-year-old single dad. Been raising my boy alone since he was 5. We live in a small cabin outside Juneau, Alaska. Quiet place close to nature. I work odd jobs, woodcutting, some maintenance for the nearby lodges, even wildlife tours in the summer. Life's simple and that's how I like it. After my wife passed away in a car accident 7 years ago, I stopped wanting big things. Just peace, stability, Eli's laughter. That was enough. But that night, nothing was peaceful. I rushed toward her as she stumbled, arms swaying like she might collapse. She had a gash across her cheek, blood dried on her forehead, and her knees were scraped raw. Her lips parted like she was trying to speak, but no sound came. Just a whisper of breath. I caught her before she hit the ground. Hey, you're okay," I said, steadying her. "You're safe now." She blinked up at me, pupils uneven, and murmured, "It fell." "What did?" I asked. She didn't answer. Just slumped against me, unconscious. I carried her all the way back to the cabin. Eli held the door open, his eyes wide as dinner plates. "Is she dead?" he asked. "No, buddy. She's just hurt." I laid her gently on the couch and fetched the first aid kit. I've dealt with backcountry injuries before. Broken bones, bear bites, concussions, but this was different. She wasn't a hiker who fell. She looked like she'd been through a war. After I cleaned the wound on her face and covered her with a blanket, I sat beside her and tried to piece it together. Who was she? Where had she come from? I turned on the radio. That's when I heard it. Breaking news from Southeast Alaska. A private charter plane en route to Anchorage lost contact around noon today. The aircraft was carrying 5 passengers, including famed tech entrepreneur and philanthropist Layla Hart. My skin went cold. I looked over at the woman lying unconscious in my living room. The name didn't mean anything to me at first, but then they said it again, this time with more detail. Known for her billion-dollar medical tech company and recent humanitarian work in war zones. They read off the passenger list. Layla Hart was on board. I walked over to the bookshelf and grabbed the old tablet Eli uses for school. The Wi-Fi is weak in our area, but it worked just enough to load a photo from a news article. The woman's face stared back at me. Polished, composed, dressed in a blazer. But there was no mistaking it. It was her. I sat down hard on the edge of the table. A billionaire in my cabin. Didn't make sense. What was someone like her doing on a tiny plane in remote Alaska? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone found her yet? She woke up the next morning with a jolt, gasping like she'd been underwater. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal. Eli was playing with his Legos on the floor. She sat up too fast and winced, grabbing her ribs. "Easy," I said, walking over. "You've got a cracked rib. Maybe 2. Her eyes darted around the room. "Where am I?" "My cabin. I found you by the river last night. You collapsed." She blinked. I need to get to Anchorage." "I figured," I said. "But you're not going anywhere right now. You need rest." She looked down at the blanket draped over her legs, her hands trembling slightly. "I was in a plane," she said. "We went down. I don't remember how I got out. Just fire. Smoke. Then trees. You're lucky to be alive. She met my eyes. Were there any others? Survivors? Not that I've heard, I said quietly. She nodded, biting her lip. For a while she didn't speak. I let her sit with it. The weight of knowing you walked away from something no one else did. That's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. Eventually she asked for water. Then oatmeal. She didn't eat much, but enough to get some color back in her face. Your name's Layla, right? I asked carefully. She flinched. You know who I am. The radio said your plane went down. I looked it up. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't want anyone to know yet. I didn't press. But there was something in her voice, something tired. Not just from the crash. Like she'd been tired a long time. For the next 2 days she stayed with us. I made her tea. Eli read her books. She told him stories about building machines when she was a kid. Made him laugh with a silly voice. She was softer than I expected. Not what you'd imagine from someone worth billions. She was human. But on the third night something changed. I heard movement outside just after midnight. I grabbed the shotgun from behind the door. Not because I was scared of her, but because bears and desperate people sometimes wander close. When I stepped out onto the porch, I found her standing there barefoot, staring at the stars. You should be resting, I said. I couldn't sleep. You cold? She shook her head. No, just remembering. She paused, then turned to me. I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. I frowned. What do you mean? She looked down. It was my assistant's flight. I took her seat last minute. She had a family thing. I didn't say anything. Survivor's guilt hits hard. There's no way to reason with it. I've spent my whole life running companies, she said. Fixing things. Inventing. Leading. And in that moment, all I could think about was how none of it meant anything. Not when you're falling out of the sky. Her voice cracked just a little. Enough. I stepped closer gently. You survived. That's not nothing. She looked at me, really looked. You're not what I expected. I get that a lot. She almost smiled. Then she asked, why haven't you called anyone? I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. She studied me, then whispered, thank you. The next morning I drove her to the ranger station 20 miles north. She was quiet most of the ride. When we got there, she looked at me like she wanted to say something more, but then just nodded and stepped out. 3 hours later, her face was all over the news. Layla Hart found alive. Billionaire survives plane crash. Rescued by single father. They didn't say my name. That's how I wanted it. But later that week, a black SUV showed up outside my cabin. A man in a suit handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter, check, and something else entirely. He didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on the old sofa, wrapped in a thin quilt, staring at the crack in the ceiling while the woman, Claire, rested in his bed, bandaged, bruised, and still barely saying a word. He'd stayed up researching after she fell asleep. The news was everywhere. Breaking. Private jet crash in Cascade Ridge. Unidentified woman missing after CEO's plane goes down. And finally, a clearer image, grainy but unmistakable. Claire Devlin, co-founder of a billion-dollar aerospace firm, and recently at the center of a boardroom power struggle. Missing. Presumed dead. But she wasn't dead. She was asleep in his home, wrapped in his flannel sheets. By dawn he made pancakes. More for something to do than hunger. His son Eli padded into the kitchen, still half asleep, and blinked at the plate. Did we win the lottery or something? Jude smiled faintly. Nope. Just thought you deserved pancakes. Claire stirred mid-morning, stepping out of the bedroom slowly, wrapped in one of Jude's hoodies. Her limp was still there, but her eyes were sharper. You cook? She asked. Jude shrugged. I survive. Pancakes. She nodded. They ate quietly, with only the sound of syrup dripping and the occasional chirp from outside. Finally, Claire looked up. You know who I am, don't you? I figured it out last night, Jude said. Didn't change anything. Claire tilted her head. Why haven't you called the police? I figured you'd ask me to when you were ready. Or not. Either way, you're safe here. Something about the way he said that made her swallow hard. Maybe it was the ease of it. No tension, no strings. Just a man offering refuge. She set her fork down. I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. Jude waited. I switched last minute. My assistant was supposed to go. The plane went down. But I think someone made sure it would. I wasn't just lucky. I was targeted. Jude stared. You think someone tried to kill you? Claire nodded. I've been in too many meetings with too many men who smiled while planning my exit. Financial exit. Physical. Maybe. My co-founder's been trying to push me out for months. But I wouldn't sell. I know too much. And now here I am, vanished. If I'm smart, I stay that way. Jude folded his arms. And if you're not, then I end up dead for real next time. It was the first moment she looked afraid. Not just in pain or guarded, but truly vulnerable. Jude didn't ask questions. Instead, he cleared their plates, handed her a clean towel and said, Bathroom's down the hall. Take your time. Over the next 2 days, Claire stayed. She helped Jude with dishes, helped Eli with math homework, and once even swept the front porch. She didn't talk about her past much, but sometimes she let things slip, like how she grew up in foster care like Eli. Or how she once slept in a server closet while launching her startup. She and Jude were opposites. She moved like she was made of glass and iron, fragile but unbreakable. He moved like weathered wood, worn but warm. And yet they laughed. She teased him about his flannel addiction. He teased her about being too neat. She fixed his toaster. He fixed her favorite mug. One night, after Eli went to bed, they sat on the porch under a quilt, listening to crickets. I should go, she said softly. Jude said nothing. I can't just hide. I built something I care about. I won't let them erase me. He turned to her. Then don't. She looked down at her lap. You know I'm worth billions, right? I know. You haven't asked for anything. Not even a photo. Why? Because you're not a headline here. You're just Claire. The woman I found in the snow who told my kid bedtime stories and fixed my broken toaster. She blinked fast, then chuckled. You're something else, Jude. The next morning she left a note. Just a scribbled thank you and a promise. I'll find a way to make this right. And she was gone. The house felt colder. Eli noticed right away. Is she coming back? Jude didn't have an answer. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. The news shifted from crash mystery to hostile takeover to finally. CEO Claire Devlin returns, reclaims company after attempted coup. Jude watched the press conference from his phone during his lunch break, leaning against the mop cart. Claire stood on the stage, bandage barely visible under her suit sleeve, eyes fierce and full of fire. I disappeared not by accident, she said, but because someone wanted me gone. I survived. And I will not let my life be edited out. She didn't mention Jude. Not by name. But when the reporters shouted questions and flashes went off like lightning, she looked into the camera and said, I owe my life to the kindness of strangers. One in particular. You know who you are. Jude smiled. Later that week, an envelope arrived. Inside was a card. Still fixing toasters. Want to help me rebuild an empire. And beneath it, a one-way plane ticket. Eli looked at him that night. Are we going? Jude took a long breath, looked around their little house, the photos, the cracks, the comfort. And then he smiled. "Yeah, buddy. I think we are." They left with nothing but a duffel bag and a memory of snow. But what they found on the other side was something most people spend a lifetime searching for. Not money. Not fame. Second chance. A new beginning. And a love story born from wreckage.